Hi everybody, my name is Jeremy Griffith. You might know me from Instagram, username Los Angeles. And I don't normally lecture. I don't publish or anything like that usually. But Illusionist gave me the opportunity to sort of showcase the things that I love doing most, some of the things that were the most successful on Instagram. And so we're going to go through a lot of my favorite pieces that are really odd. They're not sort of widely distributed, and let's go ahead and get right into it. All right, so this first thing is called ripping. It's freaky, it's not a widely known secret, and it can be done on 90% of the decks that are produced by United States Playing Card Company. So let me show you what it looks like, and then you can decide for yourself. And that is a perfect anti-pharaoh. So here's the idea, is that when the deck of cards from USPC is produced, there's a trace amount of playing card material that's left on one side that's missing from the other. And as a result, that means that you can treat any new deck for a short period of time, usually about 20 to 30 minutes, you can treat it like a stripper deck. But you have to pull it in a very, very particular way. So the basic concept here would be a normal stripper deck looks like this. This is called a tapered stripper deck. And what happens is if I take any card and I reverse it, you'll notice there's a pretty large protrusion on one side. So if I wanted to get that card out, I could glide my fingers along it, and because of that tapered edge, it's going to pull out as this deck pulls away. But because the cards aren't manufactured with a taper, but instead just a slight protrusion on one side, I cut these to sort of exaggerate what you're seeing. These are kind of as if they were curved. And what's going to happen is, if you were to reverse a single card and you put it in the deck, if you held it just like you would a stripper deck and try to pull something, you wouldn't be able to, because the edges are going to stop you from being able to do that. And no matter how far you move your fingers in, you won't be able to pull away. So there's a very particular way that you have to hold the cards. And I got to give credit. There's a young man named Christian Kraft who figured out that if you were to hold at the edges of a deck and there's a single card reversed, if you move your thumb onto that protrusion on that side, watch what happens on this side. If I push in, it causes that corner to come out, which means it comes against this middle finger, and now I can pull away. So if I were to take some brand new deck, call it, here, this is a Kickstarter deck from Jackson Robinson. All right, we'll open it fresh, take away some of the gaff cards, and all I'm going to do is reverse a single card. And what you'll notice is now there's a slight piece of card that's missing from this side that is now sticking out of that side, that you would only notice if you bevel the deck. So if I wanted to peel that card out, I'm going to come right here, I'm going to hold the edges, and I'm going to rock it so that way it puts a bit of air between all the cards. So that might be a bit hard to see, but now there's just a slight bit of air, so that way it removes the friction between the cards. So then I go in here, I place my thumb on that protrusion, it forces it toward my finger, and I can now glide that one back out of the deck. But what that means is that now you have everything available to you in a brand new deck that you would normally have with the stripper deck. This is a temporary situation. Eventually this discrepancy will wear down. But while you've got it, it means that you can treat it just like you would a breather crimp, right? So right now what I've got it is I've pulled it out, right? I've rocked it back and forth to add a bit of space between the cards. I've placed my thumb on that protrusion and I pull it out just a little bit. And if I go right here, if I take it and I kick that side in, it now forces it out that side. So now this is called a brief. And if you ever want to use a brief like that, you have to press down hard and then lift on that brief. And now you can cut that card to the bottom, and you can do whatever it is that you like. But the point of a stripper deck is not being able to pull cards out from the deck. The point of a stripper deck is being able to use that to control the situation. So for instance, I've got that queen on bottom. If I wanted to control the jack that was next to it, if I cut it into the middle, then I can spread the cards. I don't have to hold a break or anything like that. Whenever I'm ready, I can just come back in, rock it back and forth, peel that out, kick it in, and then cut. And there's my jack because I placed my queen on bottom. So this affords a lot of opportunity. It means that you could learn, ace cutting routines. It means that you could learn a number of riffle stacking controls. And you would have this available to you, like I said, on 90% of the decks produced by United States Playing Card Company. This doesn't work with the decks that come from Taipei or Taiwan. The edges are too smooth and not papery enough for your thumb to get purchase. But I'm kind of eager to see what you guys can do with it. So if any of you are on Instagram, do me a favor. Once you get this down, show me. Because I'm willing to bet you guys will come up with some stuff I never even thought was possible. This next section is on Yo. And Yo was originally produced by Lee Asher in his lecture note Sex Sells. And then we're going to do a bit of an addition by R. Paul Wilson using a concept called a breather crimp. So Yo is a beautiful flourish. And maybe you've seen it before. It's where you relax your hand. As you toss up the deck, it separates in a very even manner and goes straight vertical. So this is what it looks like. It's a beautiful flourish. I'm not known for flourishing, so I went hunting for ways to utilize this for Magic and came across an idea that if you were to use a breather crimp, you now have a difference between the pressure and the friction of one card versus another, right? When you spread these out, if I just let them sort of fall forward, they all sort of spread out evenly, right? But when you have a crimp, and a crimp is just a slight bend in the card, now it separates at that crimp because of the style of crimp I'm using. So what I'll do is we'll go over Yo first, and then go into how to use a crimp and start pointing Yo more toward magical purposes beyond flourishing. So Yo, to begin with, get comfortable dropping the cards. I'm not kidding, just throw them up and walk away and then deal with the mess. Because that is honestly the only way you're going to get comfortable with throwing the majority of the deck up and then trying to catch them all as they come down. So when you go to do it, what's going to happen is, this is the position that I do Yo from. The thumb isn't actually holding on to anything. The deck is beveling toward my finger, meaning that it's sort of tilting toward my finger, my front finger, and then it's resting against my middle finger. These two fingers are going to be there, and they're going to be very important when the deck starts coming down from the air. So you start small. Take the deck, and all you're going to do is just sort of give it a little kick with your wrist, and you'll feel it start to maneuver forward. And it's okay if when you start Yo, you're doing it small like this. All right? And then you start working your way higher. You start trying to go maybe half a foot up. And as you do this, you'll start to feel how much you need to hold on to the deck with this part of your hand. You'll start to feel how much you might need to squeeze in order to keep that bottom card where it is. And then once you get confident enough, start trying to go for, I'd say, 1.5 feet. So start with a foot and then work your way up to about 1.5 feet. And if you find that they're starting to clump, because this is very much something that you would do with a new deck, a lot of people try to do this with an older deck, and because the friction is too great between the cards, it clumps up. So when you throw it up, you get like these huge packets coming down at your hand. So if you start to feel them clump up, even on a new deck, just give it a bit of a riffle like this. And that'll add some air between the cards, so that way when you do it, you get a bit more even separation. Okay? Now I won't go as high as I can, just because we'll be out of frame, but this will take about a week of practice to get it to the point where you're comfortable just sort of letting go of the cards. And then maybe a month for you to be able to do it sort of second nature, where you don't have to look at the cards, you don't have to do what my family affectionately refers to as the focus face. You know, when you're catching it, you look like this. And then you won't really have to think about it. You'll just sort of do it. Now, using it for magical purposes, this is where it gets kind of interesting, because as you start to get more comfortable with the way the cards feel in your hand as they're flying up, now we're going to throw in a variable. So what I'll do is I'm going to grab, let's do the aces. I'll go through here. That's another one. That's another one. And one final one down here. Okay. So this uses a concept called a reverse breather crimp. And breather crimp was first seen in Di Vernon's The Vernon Chronicles, Volume 1. And then later it was sort of explored in a lot of different areas by different magicians. But the idea of a breather crimp, a reverse breather crimp, is you're essentially going to put like an X-shaped bend in the card. And it doesn't have to be deep, but if I take my thumbs and just sort of touch them in the middle of the card, sort of following this long diagonal, and then I take my fingers here and I just sort of press, it sort of bows the card along that diagonal. And I'm going to take both thumbs and just sort of drag them out, and I don't have to go all the way to the edge, I can just sort of stop there. And now I have this very soft diagonal bend in the card. And then I'm going to do the same thing along the other diagonal. There we go. So now in this light, when I'm looking at it, I see an X-shaped bend on the card. And the way that you can test this out is if you set it on top of the deck, it'll now spin like a top. That's very important because it means that for this card, that's the only part of the card that's actually touching the deck. When you release all the pressure, that single part is the only part that glides along the card. So if I just did this with a single card, if I go to do yo, it means that because there's less friction, as I toss these cards up, this one will go significantly higher. So if I go here, it rides up just high enough for me to grab it. But here's the cool part, is that if you take a bunch of cards and you place them behind that breather crimped card, it means that they'll ride along with it. So I now have 4 aces on top with my ace of spades with a breather crimp, and I'm going to do yo, and what will happen is, because of that lack of friction, they're going to ride up about maybe 2 inches higher than the rest of the deck. So here we go. When that happens, I'm going to reach down and I'm going to grab them. So go here, and there you go. Now that's very, very flashy. Kind of a fun way to produce 4 of a kind or a royal flush or something. There's something that I do. This is called a BC shuffle. This is based on a Jennings jog shuffle. So if you want to sort of have a way to keep track of the cards and then come back to them, I go here. When I'm doing an overhand shuffle, whenever I shuffle cards on top of the cards that I need, I push my thumb along this corner and it causes a card to drag out, like way far. And then I just sort of throw all the rest of the cards on there. So this is now a bookmark for where my aces are. And if I take my thumb and I push this side in and then I ride it along, if I get all these fingers out of the way, if I ride it along, see now it's pushed out over here. And then I can take my ring finger and drag it out. So now on my side of things, I've got all these cards sticking out, and this is the one that I need. Because if I grab here and I cut, now all my aces are back on top. And now when I go to do yo, there are my aces. So if you have done all the practice and you can now grab the aces because of that breather crimp when you're doing yo, there's an idea that you can experiment with. And this is called a yo stab. And the idea is that as you're tossing the cards up, you're going to take another card and stab it into your yo spread as it comes down. And where you stab it is going to be meaningful. So I've got my aces on the bottom, and this guy has a reverse breather crimp, right? So it means that when I put it into the deck, I'll turn around so you can see what I'm seeing. When I go to do yo, that is going to cause just a bit of space, a gap, to appear when I go to do yo. So if I go here, you'll see, like right down by my hand, it creates that gap. So if you wanted to, if you're gutsy enough, you can take another card, set this up, toss it up, and have it land right next to the aces. So if I go find that queen, there's my ace. So let me try that one more time just so we've got the actual spread. Yeah, there you go. That is a consistent thing that you can do. I can tell you that when doing that, humidity does have an effect. So if you're someplace that's really warm, that might start to wear down, or the cards might start to clump just because of the moisture, in which case I'd say avoid trying to do yo effects in general. But if you're in a cool place, you've got a brand new deck, go for it, give it a shot. It's cool if you fail. We drop cards all the time, so go for it. All right, so ditching. The first thing that I need to tell you about ditching is that it is far easier to do in person than people think. A lot of people think that, oh, you could do it on camera, but you can't do it like in front of people. The exact opposite is true. Because when you're doing it on camera, there's no misdirection, there's no looking up, there's no making eye contact, and it's a very direct shot into what you're doing. But if you're in front of people, you can interact with them, you can laugh, you can joke, and then you can ditch whenever it is that you most feel like it. So this first ditch is a whole deck ditch. It happens as you place a card on top of the deck, and it's designed as a finisher. So you get ready to, you've found the card, this is normally a routine ender. You get ready to ditch, and what's happening is, this is normally something where I hold off. I don't overtly say, and now the deck is gone. I actually just give it a second, give it a pause. So what happens is as I'm taking this card up onto the deck, it's coming in and it's covering everything that's happening right here behind the card, which is my first finger is going to tap the deck, and I'm going to release all the pressure on the deck. And when I do this, the entire deck flies as a whole in one nice, neat little clump into my lap. So if I do that at speed, then you can just throw the cards out. Now, a couple of things. When you're lapping a whole deck, this does take practice to get it to land as a single unit. A lot of people think that when you do this, it's going to explode everywhere. Not with practice, okay? But what I would say is just sit at a table, place your hand right there, and you want this to slide like through this free space between your pinky and your palm, and just practice sending it back as a unit, okay? If you are going to ditch in person, I'd say lean in on it. So when you come here, when you lean in, it means that there's less space for them to view. So if you inadvertently kick it back, they might have this view into the cards falling into your lap. So come in, and as you place it, drop them, and then you can just throw the card out, and it makes for a beautiful surprise at the end of a routine. So the sweep ditch is normally done with two cards. So in this case, we'll just use the 10 of spades and the king of diamonds. And the way this normally goes is at some point during the process, what I do is I put a little gap between the cards and I bow the cards. This is a variation of what's called a snap crimp. So when I bow the cards and I set them on, it means that they sort of warp at different heights. And what happens is when I go to ditch the rest of the deck, I'm coming here, and as I press on this side, I get those cards to kick up. There's one, there's two. And so I come in for the first card, and I lift, and then as I come down, this hand comes in, and I'm going to do the same thing with this hand. I'm going to apply pressure, and because that card also has the bow in it, I'm going to place that set of fingers on that edge, but these fingers are going to drag along the table. And as I go to do a cutting motion, I'm going to kick these cards off the edge of the table as I'm holding this card, which looks like this. So that's actually a great way to practice, especially when you're ditching. Just get used to peeling off that one card and just setting it down, because that's the circular motion that makes this ditch work so well. So you come in, you grab one, you sweep. As you set this one down, you set this one down, and then you do a squaring motion like you've got the whole deck, and then you can turn it over and show that there's only two. So single card ditching is actually one of my favorite things to do. It's the idea of taking a card completely out of play, kicking it back into your lap so that way you can retrieve it whenever you want in the routine. All you have to do is lean back and then put it in your palm, put it into tenkai, whatever it is that you most enjoy doing. In this case, this is called a kickback ditch. This is something I've done before. This is something that you guys may know from my work. But the simple idea is taking the top card out of play or using it as a change. So I'll do both. So the idea is that as I bring my hand around, I've got it now in mechanics grip. This hand might sweep or pick at lint or something like that, and then as it goes to get the deck, this thumb contacts near the top of the card, my hand relaxes, and this card gets kicked back off the edge, thus the name. So when I do it, now this card is way back here, and I've got the card out of play. And this is great, especially if you're doing a card control. If I had the Queen of Spades, I could come here, and now I've got it right there. Now, the way this gets used as a change is just turn the deck over, right? If you had the card second position from the bottom, right, you could come here, and you could be like, and after all of that shuffling, I've now controlled your card to the bottom. And their card is actually the 9 of clubs, right? So they go, no, 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 this is a beautiful way to do this. And you're like, wait, what was your card? And then just lean forward. Don't look at the deck, just lean forward. And then ask them, and when they say, oh, the 9 of clubs, then you go, and just look at the deck. Don't say anything, just look at the deck. All right, so again, with single card ditching, especially at the fingertips, finesse, a little bit of drama tends to help. This one is a lot harder to do. It does take a lot of practice. It does take a lot of timing. And when it comes to ditching, you should be able to fool yourself in the mirror. So if you have like a smartphone or something, set it up in front of you and record yourself doing a ditch. And if you're not fooling yourself, you're not fooling anyone else. So with this particular single card ditch, this one is supposed to be very open. Everything remains at the fingertips. And the reason there's so much timing here is because the second the fingers come beyond the edge of this card, this first finger is going to come out, and all that's happening is I'm releasing the card and tapping the edge at the same time. And it rides along the air, and the beautiful part is that as it comes down, because of the direction, you're only viewing, if you ever did flash, you'd only be viewing the very thinnest part of the card as it comes down. So when you come over, all you're doing is kicking it and then touching your palm, and it has this very beautiful sort of music look to it. You come here and then, and it's gone, show your hands empty, and you're good. The one-handed top palm is easily my favorite and most utilized palm. I've leaned on it in almost every performance that I've ever done. I think that and the pinky count are two of the best investments that you could ever make when you're first learning to handle a deck of cards. So the one-handed top palm, the idea is that you're palming off the top card, but the way that you're doing it is by kicking it off with your pinky. So this is the motion that happens, and it forces it up in here, and then all that I'm doing is I'm just setting down the deck. Now this one is kind of intense when you're first learning to do this. A lot of people, when they hold the deck, with their thumb, they put it out toward the edge. When you want to do a one-handed top palm, you want to move your thumb slightly in, so away from that back corner. When you go to do a one-handed top palm, you're going to pull your pinky up and rest the pad of the end of the pinky right on that edge, right there. So as I apply pressure, what would normally happen is it would rotate out and away. And the problem that people have when they're first learning to do this is that they go to palm that and it slides right out, right? It just rotates on that sort of pivot. So the way that you get over that, and this took sort of years to come across, is that I bring my thumb back and then I lower the amount of space that this card has to swing out past the deck. So what I'm going to do is kick my thumb up and let my hand come down toward the deck so it has no room to swing beyond. And then once it's up here, I'm going to relax my fingers, come in, and bring it up into my palm. So I'm going to curve my hand back up. Now there are a couple of things about palming a card that everyone needs to know. Okay? In general, when I'm palming a card, what's happening is when it's at the table, you're not holding it with the pinky and the base of the thumb. This is normally how people hold a magician's palm type card. This is a classic palm position, meaning that you hold with the pinky and the base of the thumb. If you're going to do that, the first thing is these fingers aren't holding anything, so relax these fingers. Don't monkey paw it. Just relax the fingers and keep them together. And then this part of the thumb, everyone forgets that this part is much like this part on your finger. And everyone is always sort of kicking their thumb way out because they're afraid to bend the corner of the card. So bring your thumb in and bow this corner. All right, if you ever need to straighten it back out, you can come here, bow it back, and now the card's back to being straight. It's not bowed in like that. But when you come to the table, the one subtlety that I learned from Alan Ackerman is he would always palm with the first finger. So the pressure was actually between the first finger and the base of the thumb. But that makes a lot of sense when you're at the table. If you had your fingers bowed the way that you normally do, your hand would bow weird on the table. If you didn't have anything there, the first finger sort of naturally bows in. You very rarely see it like this. Your hand sort of naturally curves anyway. But the first finger a little bit more because of this. So what you're doing is called a broken palm. When you're holding this, your first finger is coming in and it's just keeping that card from falling back flat to the table. But even if it did, you could still pick it up with your first finger and reset it. All right? So now you've got that covered, and here's what I would recommend, especially with this. Get comfortable doing what's called equipments. Equipments are things, motions that you do with your hands. You pick up things, you move it. Get used to doing that. Like grab a glass of water and try to like drink the glass as you have a card palm. You want to get very, very comfortable having that there. And then whenever you're ready, either make it go to the box. If you want, you can lap it. You can do whatever it is that you most enjoy doing. My personal favorite, honestly, is doing card to pocket. So you could stand up, come right here, reach in, and act like you've pulled the card from your pocket. There are a lot of different options that you have if you've got a good palm, and this is one of the best ways that you can use to get into it. So this switch actually has a lot of credit toward Babel. Babel is honestly one of the best ditchers that you will ever find. He is exceptional at lapping with cards, and there's a particular move in this change. It's sort of a shock value type of change that comes from something that he does with the entire deck. I'm simply doing with a single pair of cards. So what's going to happen is you want two contrasting cards, so it can either be a selection or like the Joker or something like that. And all you're going to do is when you get the doubled up card, it doesn't really matter how you do it. The idea is that the deck needs to go away with the hand that's going to be holding the card during the switch. Okay? So if your base hand is here, I normally come here. I start doing this spin that's mostly just for flash, and then to give you an idea of what's going to happen, as I rotate the card around to turn it face up, all I'm doing is I'm splitting the cards, I'm forcing it back into Tenkai, and then I'm relaxing my hand as I set this card forward, right? So if I have the double, right, I've got this, I come here and I relax, and all I'm doing is just pinching it against the table. That's it. And then the kicker is when I go to turn it around, when I go to set it down, what's going to happen is I'm going to drop this. This is going to go down below the table as my hand comes toward this card. So it's going to make this motion, right? Right here, there, right? Here, there. And my hand, because of this dual motion activity, it's very difficult to distinguish between what's happening on one side and another. So I'm going to swap out the queen for the 8. I come here, and it's this motion that you just, like I said, record yourself doing this. You've got it here, come forward. That was actually terrible. Let me do that again. Come here as you reach for the deck, okay? Because you want it as one fluid motion. come here, separate, set it down, reach for the deck, and it's face down, you can leave it, and then later you can turn it over and show that it's changed back. But it's got this very cool sort of swapping in and out. It's very surprising. Anyone who's really, really gunning for you, really watching what you're doing, it's very safe because this Tenkai, your entire arm and hand is covering this card. Even as you swap it out, because this motion is happening, you end up having an excuse for the motion of everything that's going on, which makes it very, very difficult to track any switching that might be happening. Okay, so this is the Arthur Finley steel, which is actually a variation of the diagonal palm shift from Expert at the Card Table. The diagonal palm shift, the cards sneak into the base hand. In Arthur Finley steel, all the motions are nearly the same, right? As a card is placed into the middle, right, at the very last second, you're going to kick it in. So it's got that. Your thumb is in the way, so you move your thumb toward the very edge. This card ends up just sliding down. Now, normally in a diagonal palm shift, these fingers are going to rotate it into palm on the base hand. Instead, what we're going to do is grab up where this clear part of the deck is. We're going to bring this hand in and touch this part of the card, so right there. And then I'm going to let it sink into my hand. So now the only thing that I have to clear is this tiny corner. So as I set down the deck, I'm going to set it off to a diagonal, so that way when I'm pulling back, it's already in the natural motion of trying to clear that card. And then I come back and just shade the card with my hand. Okay? If you wanted, you could lap it, you could keep it here. Actually, this is kind of nice because the Arthur Finley steel goes straight into a gambler's cup, or a gambler's palm, which is how we do mucking, right? So if you ever learn mucking, you can swap cards out. So I've got the 4, that's the 8, there's the 4. So it's a great way to sort of lead into a lot of very cool table moves.